This is Frankie Lynch, Saturn Girl. Please visit me at frankielynch.com. I do wonderful readings. And subscribe to my YouTube channel at frankielynch777. I do wonderful lives and awesome videos. So please click the bell to be notified. And consider giving to my Patreon to keep my wonderful content going. All my information will be below. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about the vernal equinox because today is the vernal equinox. What, pray tell, is that? The spring equinox. It's that time of equal night and equal day during the course of the sun's journey of a cycle of a solar year. Within the zodiac, we have represented for us the alternation between light and dark over the course of a year. We have represented for us the soul as it makes its journey from its dark prison in matter to its source or its home in the fullness of light. In tropical astrology, we fix Aries at the vernal equinox. There are very important symbolic reasons for this. First of all, Aries represents the beginning of the zodiac, and that's where it gets a lot of its symbolism bursting forth onto the scene. It's a time of equal night and equal day, but where darkness no longer dominates. This is when the sun begins to wax, which is probably why the sun is exalted in Aries, because it is that time when the sun continues its journey northwards towards the summer solstice as the light begins to wax. In the Christian phraseology, we could even see this as the birth in Bethlehem. The sun continues its journey from its place of equal night and equal day, and it reaches its zenith for the course of a solar year at the summer solstice in Cancer, where the light is its brightest. Then immediately from that point, we have the sun descending towards Libra. And as it reaches Libra, another place of equal night and equal day, this is where conscious choice is made to descend into the darkness in Scorpio, where darkness dominates. What do we mean symbolically by light and dark? These terms get so thrown around quite a bit. Well, in many esoteric contexts, it has to do with spirit and matter, between the dark prison of the form and the liberation of the soul or the spirit from that form. That means death. So the sun descends from its place of equal night and equal day in Libra, entering Scorpio, where darkness finally dominates and where Scorpio gets a lot of its meaning as well. And then the sun approaches its place of death in Capricorn at the winter solstice. This is occultly where the sun god died. And this is the depths of winter in the northern hemisphere, because that's where the symbolism of astrology came from. Ancient Mesopotamia, which is in the northern hemisphere. So the sun, or the soul, occultly dies at that place where it's the darkest and the coldest, and where the nights are the longest. But at that point of death, it's almost immediately that the sun begins its journey northwards again, but not immediately. Because what happens at the solstice? Well, the word solstice comes from Latin, sol, and stitios, which means sun stands still. What we see at the winter solstice is the sun reaching its lowest point on its arc during the cycle of a year. And the sun did not appear to move from that point for 3 days. I don't mean the sun didn't rise and set like it normally does. It didn't appear to move up or down on its arc for 3 days. And so the ancients would say, the sun stands still for 3 days. It sort of gives us a new perspective on that fun little Christian phrase, on the third day he rose again. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and in a way it does have to do with death. And what do I mean by death? St. Paul said, I die daily. He didn't mean physically dying. We're talking about initiation. And Capricorn is the sign of initiation. What, pray tell, is initiation? It's been defined many ways. We could say it's entering into a new experience of yourself, entering into a new space in consciousness. But ultimately, it's removing the layers of pretense, the layers of conditioning. We're stripping ourselves down, bit by bit, more to our essential core, more and more of what we really are. And this again is the story pictorially symbolized for us in the zodiac. We occultly die in Capricorn. But almost immediately, the light begins to emerge again as the sun begins its journey northward towards its place, its zenith at the summer solstice. It was on its downward journey, right? It's moving southwards towards the winter solstice. So the winter solstice is associated with death and thereby initiation. What's interesting about this is that scattered about the earth's surface, we have for us, hewn in stone, monuments to initiation throughout antiquity, many of them aligned with the winter solstice. It appears as though many megalithic monuments were actually used for initiation, and by that I mean expansion of consciousness. Even the University of Stanford's Solar Center acknowledges that many of these megalithic monuments were in fact aligned in such a way to imply religious rites surrounding the solstices and equinoxes, particularly the winter solstice. One example is a megalithic site in Ireland called Newgrange, dating back to 3200 BC. That's over 5,000 years ago. Within this monument, there's a central chamber, and above that chamber, there's a slit that permits a single shaft of pale blue-white light from the planet Venus every 8 years on the winter solstice, rising as the morning star. This event would have flooded that chamber with the most exquisite and glorious illumination. One can only imagine the effect it would have had on a candidate for initiation. Monuments like Göbekli Tepe that completely challenge our conventional wisdom on humanity seem to indicate that religion predated agriculture. So even though we might not have extensive evidence of this, it's still reasonable to theorize that these monuments could have been used for religious purposes. I would say that it could be quite obvious from the alignments with the solar cycle. So we have the occult death in Capricorn, which also implies that we have the vision of initiation, because it's at that moment where we are spiritually bereft that the greatest opportunity for realization occurs. Realization about the nature of who and what we are and our relationship to the rest of existence. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Capricorn, and he even said, "I have been to the mountaintop." What's the mountaintop? It's the mountaintop of initiation, where we behold the new vision of what's possible. And now, we leave Capricorn and continue our journey where the sun moves northwards, and we return once again to Aries, the vernal equinox, the place of birth, the time when the light begins to wax and darkness no longer dominates. Therefore, we are occultly reborn again, just like the Christ child, or like any of the other myths that we want to cite throughout history. We have the sun god Ra in Egypt, or Utu in Sumerian, or Shamash, that same god in Akkadian. The sun to the ancients was God, and the human soul was a reproduction of the light of God within ourselves, analogically relating us to him, the parts to wholes, and the component to the system. The idea or the philosophy behind much of this is that souls descend from their source. The idea behind this is symbolized within the parable of the prodigal son. Souls, or consciousness, leave their source in search of their fortune in the material world. And what do? We squander our inheritance. Before we know it, we're eating pig slop, symbolic of the prison of matter. And we have these very painful realizations from the ability to dimly sense the truth of what we are. The prodigal son slowly comes to his senses and says, "What am I doing? My father's servants have better food than this. I'm just going to return to my father's home to be a servant and to eat the stale bread that his other servants eat." This is the process of returning home to our father or our source. And if you're familiar with the parable, you'll recall that the father sees his son approaching from the distance. The father is overjoyed. He tells his other son, "Yo, go butcher the fattened calf. Prepare a feast. Invite all the guests. Get out the good wine." The other son is like, "Why? He didn't do anything." The father says to him, "You don't understand. My son was dead, and now he's alive again." This story is about us returning to our home that we dimly remember that we know we've lost because we never feel quite at home here. If you're following me, you're probably stuck in that muddy middle ground where we sort of have to live in the world of the senses and attend to its daily round. But then we have this world beyond the senses that we dimly sense. And the conviction in that sort of leads us on. Because as C.S. Lewis said, the fact that I have longings that can't be satisfied by this world is evidence that I was made for another. So the zodiac is about the path of return. It's the path of descent from divinity down to matter, and from matter back to divinity again. Hopefully reaping and garnering the experience of many lives that we bring back with us to the source, enriching its existence. You don't have to believe in any of this. I don't necessarily do. But it's the philosophy behind the zodiacal journey. And we could learn a lot about ourselves and our lives and each other from studying it and, more importantly, living it in everyday life. Once again, this is Frankie Lynch, Saturn Girl. Like the video, subscribe, and please visit my social media links below. And please consider donating to my Patreon. Please, I need you. I need you. You're my only hope. Oh, and I'm a cam girl, and I go live on chapter 8. So please follow me there. Saturnine_princess. I love you very much. You're beautiful. And have a wonderful whatever you're having.